And when it was over, the B-58 had shattered the cross-country record, reaching New York in 2 hours and 58 seconds, and winning the Bendix Trophy in the process. But the trip to New York was not the end of this day's training. As the sun set over New York, the SAC crew immediately turned their B-58 around and raced the sinking sun back to California, and won. Reaching LA 2 hours and 16 minutes later, the B-58 landed 41 minutes before the sun set over the California sky. That same spring, a B-58 landed in Paris to the cheers of a joyous and receptive French crowd, its crew well aware they had set 2 more world records. The airplane had taken off at Washington to Paris took 3 hours and 39 minutes. New York to Paris, 3 hours and 20 minutes. Both of these world records. And for their efforts, this crew was awarded the McKay Trophy by the U.S. Air Force for the most meritorious flight of the year. And they were also honored by President Kennedy, an outstanding contribution to aviation. The next record claimed by the Hustler was not another speed record. It was the world record for high altitude for an airplane carrying a payload of 2,000 kilograms and 5,000 kilograms. Major Fitzhugh Fulton guided his B-58 to an altitude of 85,360 feet, 16.5 miles high, and 2 more world records had been won by Convair's remarkable airplane. The final record claimed by the Hustler came the following year in October of 1963. A B-58 from the 305th Bomber Wing flew the 8,000-mile trip from Tokyo to London in a mere 8.5 hours. This record capped a tremendous 3 years for the crews of the B-58, and the airplane's remarkable legacy is a tribute to Convair's design and development team. They had truly created a bomber for the future, one which could perform its mission at speeds other bombers could not match.
Have a good day.
In early 1945, the U.S. Army Air Force and the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics promoted and financed a joint effort to develop a series of research aircraft to explore the transonic region of flight. The result was the Bell X-1 series of aircraft. Tests progressed slowly, with the airplane carried into the air and then released to accelerate under its own power. Finally, on the 14th of October, 1947, Chuck Yeager broke through the barrier and into history. Yeager accelerated to 670 miles per hour at an altitude of 42,000 feet, a speed of Mach 1.05. While Yeager's flight was truly historic, the American military was in many ways more concerned with the development of their new bomber fleet, including the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. The XB-47's first flight took place in December 1947 and gave notice that jet-powered bombers were the future of American air power. The design of the B-47 depended upon research data captured from the Germans, which led Boeing to the swept-wing design for their large jet. Boeing was not the only company to have benefited from captured German data. Many German scientists had fled to the United States after the war, and their influence had a dramatic effect on American aviation. One of these scientists, Dr. Alexander Lippisch, was determined to design an entirely new kind of airplane. The Convair XF-92 was the first powered delta-wing airplane to fly. This little airplane made its first flight on the 18th of September, 1948, and during several tests reached a speed of 630 miles per hour. With the success of the XF-92, Convair continued to progress with the delta wing. Although the YF-102 got off to a rocky start, the final design of the airplane demonstrated the attributes of the delta wing model. The original prototype was redesigned in 1954 with the incorporation of the Whitcomb area-ruled fuselage concept, and the airplane finally began to meet its expected performance. By 1956, the airplane had entered operational service and was now known as the F-102 Delta Dart, capable of flying at Mach 1.25 at 36,000 feet. Although the Delta Dart was impressive, it could hardly compare to an airplane Convair had begun developing a decade earlier.
Convair elected to move ahead with a submission for what was called GIBO, or GIBO as some people pronounce it. And that's a generalized bomber requirement. And it was a post-war attempt to bring state-of-the-art in bomber design up to the state-of-the-art in fighter design.
Convair had a good history with bombers. The B-36 Peacemaker, after its debut in 1945, had emerged as an integral part of the Strategic Air Command's Intercontinental Strike Force. Not surprisingly, many of the individuals involved with the B-36 took charge of the GIBO project. One of these men was Harry Hilliker, who is now known as the father of one of the world's most famous airplanes, the F-16. But before that, was an intimate participant in the development of the B-58.
My role in the B-58 was initially as head of preliminary design during the conceptual and preliminary design phases, and then subsequently as project engineer for advanced versions of the B-58.
The airplane that would eventually become the B-58 went through countless designs, and originally the airplane was conceived as a parasite. The Air Force wanted a supersonic bomber, and with a high fuel consumption of jet engines, the parasite idea seemed the best option. Parasite concepts had been tried before, like with this Republic F-84, but the ideas which emerged as part of GIBO were amazing with their daring nature and imaginative scenarios.
This is incredible. Showdown Air Combat, only on the Military Channel.
By the early 50s, air refueling had made the parasite idea obsolete, and Convair eventually produced Model 4, which was accepted by the Air Force in the fall of 1952 and pushed into formal development as the B-58. The design was a sharp contrast to the typical look for a bomber and was an early sign that Convair and the Air Force were ready to try something entirely new. One of the final touches on the design was the integration of the supersonic area rule into the airframe, which maximized the speed of the airplane by minimizing the drag on the fuselage. The design was essentially completed by 1954, and construction began of the XB-58. The high-speed and aerodynamically clean design of the B-58 required new procedures and materials to maximize the airplane's performance. The wings of the B-58 needed to be incredibly smooth to minimize supersonic drag, have a high strength-to-weight ratio to handle high speeds at low altitudes, and also be heat-resistant up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit, quite a tall order. One of the materials used to meet these strict requirements was not the product of human genius. Rather, it was something borrowed from nature. The honeycomb produced by bees has long been known as a remarkably light but strong material. The B-58 was one of the first airplanes to be built using honeycomb, which is now a standard throughout the aviation world. The concept is surprisingly simple. The wing is covered with panels of duraluminum alloy, and sandwiched in between is half an inch of fiberglass honeycomb. This honeycomb design maximizes the strength-to-weight ratio of the compound and was used extensively throughout the wings, fuselage, and engine nacelles. These structures had to be absolutely smooth and were bonded with adhesives and reinforced with beaded inner skins. To merely reach, let alone sustain speeds in excess of Mach 2, the engines of the B-58 had to be extremely powerful and reliable. The GE J-79 turbojets, with up to 15,000 pounds of thrust and afterburning power, became the standard for the operational B-58 fleet. To ensure the clean aerodynamic design of the airplane, these powerful engines were hung individually under the wings. The thin cylindrical 97-foot-long fuselage of the B-58 was relatively short and narrow for a medium-weight bomber, but this was no accident. This shape was a key to the supersonic capability of the airplane, and also produced a unique configuration for the three-man crew of the B-58. Each crewman has an individual cockpit, and there is no physical communication between the crew. This focus also dictated a unique design and arrangement for the B-58's bomb delivery system.